Have you ever wondered what your name means? And if you have you ever looked it up? Your name can actually tell you so much about you, and it can give you a lot of lore, signs, and symbols to work with. If you do a little bit of research, a little bit of digging for characters, heroes, gods or goddesses that may have had your name, you could find characteristics in them that you might not always associate with yourself, but that maybe you wished you could embody. A little while ago, I did a name meaning series on TikTok, and what I'm about to show you is a compilation of all of those names. It's a collection of some of the most common names in the English language, but it isn't all of the names. So if you want to have your name broken down in the same way, drop it in the comments below and I'll make a video about it. Hope you enjoy this compilation, and I hope you find your name in one of these videos. Love you. George and Georgia. This is another name that's really close to my heart. It's my dad's name, and it goes for Georgias, Giorgio, Georgette, Georgis, Georgi, Georgi, Yargent, Jurgis, Yuri, and Siors. I have no idea if I said that right. Like, not even remotely. But no, Igor is not part of this list. Igor is a Russian name, but George is Greek. It's based on the Greek word Georgos, meaning farmer. And Georgos is a combination of the roots ge, meaning earth, and ergon, meaning work. Now, George is one of the most common names in the Western world. This is thanks to the legend of Saint George, who you've probably heard of. The legend goes that villagers are being extorted for tributes by a dragon. At first, the villagers were giving it goods and livestock, but eventually they ran out of supplies. And so instead they cut a deal with the dragon where they sacrifice one person to it every year. Now this seemed okay at first, until the dragon asked for the village princess. And on the day she was sent out to the lake to be sacrificed, St. George arrives in the nick of time. Now from here on, there are lots of variations of this story. In some of them he just kills the dragon, in others he lures the dragon away. In the really interesting ones, St. George only agrees to slay the dragon when the villagers agree to all be baptized. Now this story of course appears before Christianity, and if your name is rooted in George, they're definitely worth reading about. But the idea is that George is involved in a light versus dark narrative. God versus the devil, Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. And in general, George is the archetypal hero. And a little secret about it that nobody talks about is that George is a theophoric name, or a name created in honor of a deity. Which deity, Ilian? The deity of deities, Zeus Almighty. More specifically, Zeus the farmer. One of the forms of Zeus that was worshipped in ancient Athens. Because we know God has many faces. So, if your name is rooted in George, then you are a true worker of this earth. You're probably grounded and persistent, deliberate and intentional, and we commend you for your courage. Because everyone that has a George or a Georgia or a Georges or a Georgette or a in their life knows that they never have to face a monster alone. Okay, let's do Nicole, as in let's do the name. So have you heard of the flood? And I'm not talking about the one where God plays favorites with Noah. I'm talking about the older flood, the Greek flood. Still not the oldest one though. But Nicole is connected to this flood because it's a variation of Nicholas, or Nicholas, or Nicola, or Nick. And it's a Greek compound word of Nike, meaning victory, and Laos, meaning people. But the Laos is very interesting because it's connected with the ancient para-etymology of the word las, meaning stone. So let's talk about the Greek flood myth, where this las comes from. So Zeus is chilling on Mount Olympus when one of his minions comes in and says, "O Zeus, Lord of the skies, God Almighty, spare me from the wrath of your thunderbolts. I come bearing a message from Earth." To which Zeus replies, "Ugh, Earth, what do they want?" "Well, King Lycaon of Arcadia has sacrificed a boy in your honor." Sacrificed a boy? The audacity, the hubris. We'll punish all mankind for this insult. Because, you know, Zeus is a very level-headed kind of guy. But Prometheus learns about this. And I mean, Prometheus is our guy. He brought us fire, endured divine punishment. He's a real one. and he tells his son Deucalion what's coming and helps him build a chest or boat to save himself and his wife, Pyrrha. No animals, though. Prometheus is pro-human, but he's not like pro-mammal en masse. Now, when the flood is over and the water starts to recede after 9 days and 9 nights, Pyrrha and Deucalion are like, okay, now what? I can't just look at your face forever. And they go to the oracle at Themis and ask her, so how do we repopulate the earth? Because we're driving each other nuts. And the oracle says, in classic oracle obscurity, cover your heads and throw the bones of your mother behind your shoulder. So they think, duh, our mother is Gaia. The bones are obviously stones. And they do what she said. And the stones that Pyrrha throws become women, and the stones that Deucalion throws become men. And these people are called Leleges or Lilegis. If there are any Greeks in the audience, let us know in the comments how this is pronounced. And these people populate Lokris. So, if your name is a derivative of Nicholas, then you're the victor of the people because you're solid, steadfast, trustworthy. You're the last one standing, and you're ready to do whatever it takes. Not for yourself, but for the world, for the people. You're ready to bring justice to all people, even the people of stone. They're your people, and you are their victor. Should we do victor too? Sarah, the much-awaited name. Like, this comment has 4 comments under it, like, yes, please, I second Sarah. My name is also Sarah. Okay, let's do it. Sarah is also sometimes spelled Sarai, and it comes from the Hebrew word Sarah, meaning princess, rooted in Sar, or prince, from Sarar, or he ruled, and related to the Akkadian Sharatu, meaning queen. But as always, let's go deeper. And let me remind you, even though I shouldn't have to, that this isn't a history class. This is a TikTok video about symbolism and living a symbolic life with your name. So don't try to come at me with facts, because I don't care. And I already know you're gonna, because Sarah was the wife of Abraham, who was famously barren until she was 90. She and Abraham had their son Isaac in their old age. And yes, we're gonna take that for a fact. And as a fact, what that means is that Sarah spent about 80 years of her life living in fear and confusion, because God had promised Abraham that he would be the father of nations. And how was he going to be the father of nations if his wife couldn't bear children? Sarah's barrenness stood in opposition to Abraham's prophecy. But Sarah isn't somebody who just allows themselves to wallow in fear and doubt, even though they might have a tendency for it, because eventually Sarah takes matters into her own hands. Sarah decides to give Abraham her maidservant so that maybe she can be the one to bear the nations. And even though Abraham's faith is enough, and we know that eventually his faith and promise with God is what allows Sarah to get pregnant, Sarah's fear never really leaves her. Even when the promise has been kept, Sarah still slips in the idea that her doubt was justified. And if you ask me, it was. 90 years is a long time to wait for a baby. But the point is here that Sarah is a go-getter. If Abraham symbolizes the comfort of faith and hope, then Sarah symbolizes the fear and doubt that push us out of our comfort zone. So Sarah might not be the most agreeable person, and she might be someone who can really bring tension to a room. Sarah challenges to take matters into our own hands, to be the masters of our own fate. She teaches us that hoping for the best isn't the only option. Sometimes when we know something isn't working for us, we might as well take an alternate route. And remember, kids, most of history is a pit of lies. So stop arguing over who said what, and when what happened, and who overcame who. It doesn't matter, because no one knows. Alex. I'm so glad that a lot of people asked about this, because it's one of my favorite names. And this includes Alex, Al, Alexa, Alexandra, Alexandria, Alessandro, Alejandro, Alasdair, Lex, Iskandar, Xander, and, funny enough, Sasha. All of these names are rooted in the Greek Alexandros, a combination of Alexine, meaning to defend or ward off, and Anir, from andros, meaning human, or man, but in a non-binary kind of way. And while the most famous person to have this name is Alexander the Great, who we will get to in a second, the earliest attestation of the name is in reference to a king named Alekasandu. He was the king of Wilusa of western Anatolia, as in where Troy supposedly was, And what's great about him is that he signed one of the earliest treaties with the Hittites. I'm not going to get into it, but the Hittites were like a freaking menace to society at the time. But then we have the name in its greatest archetypal manifestation. Ladies, gentlemen, non-binary folk, the moment you've all been waiting for. Alexander the Great, or Alexander the Third, son of Philip of Macedonia. And by the way, Philip was a beast too, so, like, I know Alexander gets all the props, but, like, there would have been no rise of Macedon without him. He pretty much paved the way for Alexander. And while Alexander means defender or protector of men, and those ideas mixed with our ideas of Alexander the Great give us a very, like, militaristic sense and conjure all these ideas of physical strength, Alexander the Great was actually very clever. I mean, he was tutored by Aristotle himself, and his reputation won him more battles than his actual physical strength. Which is why, if your name is rooted in Alex, then you're someone who has a silent strength that precedes you. You project your authority with ease and subtlety. They're protective of the people they love, and they might get a little defensive, but you can be sure that Alex does not fall in line. No, baby, Alex draws the line, and you can either get with it or get out. All right, let's do Jacob, who is also James. Really just for the simple reason that when French people heard Greek people say Jacobus, they heard Jacobus. It was Hebrew, then it was Greek, and then it was Latin, and then it was French, and then it was English. So yeah, just one long game of telephone, which is what most English is, honestly, let's be real. So Jacob, James, Jamie, Jimmy, Jimbo, Jake, Jack, Jackie, and funny enough, Santiago, or just Iago, are all derivatives of the Hebrew Yaakov, or Jacob. And what Jacob means is supplanter, or the one who follows. But what in the world is a supplanter? Because one who follows is a follower, and if he was just a follower, then why didn't she say? To supplant means to supersede, especially by force or treachery. And Yaakov comes from the Hebrew, Aqab, or heel. So Yaakov is one who seizes by the heel. And Jacob is named this because he's born literally grabbing the heel of his brother Esau. And later on in the story, he steals Esau's birthright, albeit kind of with his dad's help. And finally, Jacob is also the one who wrestles with God and is given a new name, Israel, or wrestle with God. And his new name both veils and brings to manifest the prophecy of his old name. Because in Deuteronomy, it's the kingdom of Israel that supplants or seizes Canaan by force. Illuminati exposed. No, but for real. What does this mean for the James and Jacobs and Jamies and Jackies and Jack all over the world? It means you gotta stop taking other people's shit. No, I'm kidding. Jacob is determined and clever, and they use their charm to get what they want. No one wants to say no to Jake, or Jamie, or Iago for that matter. Jacob knows how to play the game beyond good and evil, so they might be a bit of an opportunist. But who said that was a bad thing? Sometimes a blessing falls in the wrong lap, and Jacob's not about to let a blessing go to waste. Jacob wrestles with El, wrestles with Source, meaning they are not afraid. So no matter what it takes to bend the will of the universe to their own, so be it. Susanna, Sosan, Shoshana, Susie, Susan, and Lily. But why Lily? Because in Arabic, Sosan is the lily flower. But it goes deeper, don't worry. So let's get into it. And no matter what your name is, if you're into learning about legendary women in history that Christianity has buried, then stick around. You're gonna like this. First of all, Susanna is one of a number of women associated with the ministry of Jesus of Nazareth, a ministry that began with his baptism. And usually when we think of Jesus and his posse, we think 12 disciples. But here's what Luke has to say. Jesus traveled from one town to the next, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and disease. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out. Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household. And Susanna and many others. These women were helping to support him out of their own means. So first of all, Susan was a daddy, basically one of Jesus' patrons. So were Mary and Joanna and many others. The only one we ever hear about is Mary. These men and their damn virgins. And this isn't the only Susanna we've forgotten about. From Rome's last great persecution of Christians in the 3rd century rises Saint Susanna of Rome. She was the daughter of Saint Gabinus, and she refused to marry the emperor's relative. Her father wanted her to do it so she could protect herself because the emperor's cousin was a pagan. And when she refused, the emperor arrested her as a Christian and issued her beheading in her father's house. That house and her adjoining uncle's house were then turned into a church, the Church of Saint Susanna at the Baths of Diocletian. But for some reason, this martyr's story is considered of no historical value. And scholars, Christian scholars, who also happen to be male, yes, pretty much exclusively, say that her story is entirely fictitious. There are a handful of people who think that there must be a real martyr behind this story, and I'm one of them. Like Catherine, Susan signifies rebellion, but she's also solid, steadfast, and a source of support. Susan is a single-minded bad. She doesn't just stand up for what she believes in. She's ready to take the fall for it. Let's talk about Karen for a second. If you haven't seen my video on knowing the meaning of your name to live a symbolic life, go check it out. It's in the caption. But a lot of people reported having the name Karen. And yeah, a quick Google search is going to tell you that Karen means pure, clear. But it goes a lot deeper than that. Karen comes from the name Catherine, as in Saint Catherine, or Ekaterina of Alexandria. She was born a pagan in Roman Egypt around 300 AD, and she died a Christian martyr. She was a princess and a scholar, and she converted herself to Christianity at the age of 14. No one knows whether she really existed, and some historians think she might be an amalgamation of Saint Dorothea of Alexandria and Hypatia, the philosopher. If you don't know who Hypatia is, go watch Agora. Oh my God, what a movie. But the point is, Karen was a legend. And if there's one thing she embodies, it's the concept of the above and below, the past and the future, the old world and the new. Karen is a bridge, a crossing, a passageway into tomorrow. The Catherine Wheel fireworks are actually named after her. She represents rebellion and revolution. For a little while, women in France who were unmarried by the age of 25 were called Catherinettes, or like literally Karens. And it was her story that 1,000 years later would inspire Joan of Arc. So I know they get a bad rep today, but according to the mythology, you don't want to mess with Karen. Okay, let's do Michelle. As in, let's do the name, not, And Michelle goes for Michael, Mikhail, Michaela, Miguel, Mitchell, Mikhailov, Carmichael. All of these names are rooted in Michael, which comes from the Hebrew Michael. Michael. As in, who is like God? But this is famously a rhetorical question. Who is like God? Who is like Il? To which the answer is essentially no one. But here's the thing about Il, and this is important if you have this in your name. So it goes for all the names. Isabel, Ariel, Rachel, Eliane, Elizabeth, Eleanor, Israel. A lot of you were stumped by finding God's name in your name and told me that, oh, that doesn't really resonate because I'm not religious. But here's the thing. The Hebrew god El is an appropriation. Il was a Northwest Semitic word to denote a deity, but Il himself was the supreme god of the ancient Canaanites, the people the Hebrews evacuate in the Old Testament. It's okay, God said they could do it. No, I'm not talking about 1948. I'm thinking like Book of Deuteronomy. Talk about biblical colonization. And the point of Il in Canaanite religion was to distinguish the high god from the lesser gods. The lesser gods being those that govern our everyday lives and help us with the little things, and the high god being a representation of the source, the omnipresent force of sustenance. And it is that source that is being conjured in your name. So if your name is rooted in Michael, then you are rooted in the likeness of source. You might be a giver, but you might also be someone who's really reflective, as well as humble and protective. Michael is also a warrior among the archangels. And in the book of Enoch, he's one of 7 archangels who stand ready to enter before the glory of God. Michael is a protector, a warrior, a leader. Michael makes the lies we tell ourselves shatter. Michael doesn't put up with show-offs and people who think they can one-up creation. Because at the end of the day, who is like Il?